What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Ravens Roundtable. Bit of a different roundtable than the last one we just did. It's just me, and you guys are part of the roundtable because I took your questions. We're doing a little bit of a post-combine, Ask Me Anything. Haven't done a ton of these, but it's always fun to expand on answers in more than 140 characters. So everyone that kind of tweeted at me, we'll post what the question was, and we'll discuss through it. Obviously, if you guys are here on YouTube, you have to be on YouTube to use the comments. I won't see it if it's on Twitter. I will go check the replies in case you guys reply more questions, but feel free to add more and we can just run through them. And I can gladly say we didn't receive one Greg Roman question. So congratulations, Ravens fans. We're moving on to the acceptance stage in the phases of grief. So that's really exciting. So let's get right into it. So again, post-combine, ask me anything. If you guys are here on YouTube, feel free to ask more, engage with the answers. I'll pop it up. And let's get into the first one from Aiden Bradley, 86. Do the combine numbers change your impression of any player or tape trumps anything? Finally, if top three tackles are gone, would you go D-line or DB depending on who's on the board? So to start with the first question, it's a good question. How do we take the pieces of information that the combine gives us and use it in our evaluation process? For me personally, the tape does trump a lot of things. Typically, fast players play fast. Slow players play slow. But in certain situations where guys, test really well and it didn't quite look like that on tape, you go back and you watch, why did it look like that? Why is he not doing it here? Is it a play speed issue? And that process, what it does is it really shows you how you could unlock a player's potential. So, if with more coaching, better mental processing, can they unlock that play speed to play up to their athletic ability? The best way to look at take a guy like Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton didn't run a good 40, right? Didn't have a very good speed score. He had really good other aspects of his testing for his explosion and his agility, but didn't have a good speed score. But you go watch him play, and his processing is such a high level, his explosion is such a high level that his 40 long speed doesn't quite matter. So, it's all about doing that balance, but it's one of those things where, the tape doesn't lie, and that's usually where I fall back on. And then if the top three tackles are gone, would you go D-line or DB, depending on who's on the board? It would really depend. I think, in terms of factoring in the need, I think D-line's obviously a bigger need than corner is, but I do think corner's a bit of a sneaky need. So, it's really going to depend. Like if you have a Trayvon Walker through versus like Andrew Booth, I'm probably leaning Walker. But if you have, a Stingley fall, depends on the medicals with Stingley specifically. But if you have Sauce Gardner, this won't happen, but say it was like Trayvon Walker versus Sauce Gardner. How do you do that? I'd probably still lead towards the more needier position and go Trayvon Walker. So that's really where need can kind of work into your BPA. Again, don't quite see it being those two because I don't think they'll get to 14. But that's kind of how I factor it in. Thanks for the question, Aiden. And then Big Trust UK. Who are you hoping would go after an FA? Great question. Free agency starts on Monday. Who do I want to see? I know the kind of, I wouldn't say, flavor of the month. I think we've all been talking about this since the season ended, but, everyone seems to want the Honey Badger. And I get the fit. I can see how adding that versatile skill set, specifically, a guy known as a playmaker, would really help. It helps stabilize Brandon Stevens. Mike McDonald's shown an ability to play three safeties, so I think that makes sense too. But for me, and I've leaned, I kind of went back and forth on this, had a couple Twitter threads on it, and I think I finally landed. The way I would like to approach the free agency period is to try and basically stabilize the offensive line before you go into the draft. So what I'm worried about is, they go into the draft needing a couple tackles, needing a starting center, and then sure, you can go in and you can hit it. You can invest a ton of draft capital, but then going into week one, you're going to have rookies starting. I think the Chiefs are an interesting example because they had Creed Humphrey beside, oh my God, his name, kid out of Tennessee. Smith. Can't think of his first name. Drive me nuts. But anyway, so they had two rookies starting beside each other. So it's kind of like, well, what are you talking about? But they also had a vet in Orlando Brown Jr. that they brought in. They had a vet in Joe Tooney that they brought in. And then they had a little bit of right tackle stability in Yang, who had been around a bit. So I think those other investments paired really well with it. What I'd be worried about is if you get to week one and Stanley can't rock and you've now drafted a bunch of tackles, you have maybe two rookie starting tackles. Is that what we want? Did Juwan James get healthy? Is Patrick McCarty back out there instead of in the 6-man role? That's a lot of instability. That's a lot to ask of rookies as your bookends. So what I would do is, unless they were really happy with Juwan James' workouts in December when he finally got out on the practice field and was doing some work, if they looked at him and said, okay, he's already rehabbed, now he's going to have a full offseason where he's not rehabbing. He's kind of ramping up, getting ready for the season. I could see them going, okay, James is going to be that 1 year stopgap gap at right tackle. Let's move forward with that. I could kind of see that. But if they don't have that type of security, and now we're dealing with Stanley maybe not getting back, I would cut him and go after another right tackle. Go get a Morgan Moses and get him in there. There's your right tackle taken care of. Now you just need that depth for Stanley at the left tackle position. Good thing this draft is littered with left tackles. More developmental guys. Do you want developmental left tackle playing? Probably not, but that's just the situation they're in with the franchise left tackle suffering a significant ankle injury. But I think getting that stability in free agency at least one spot, as well as center, would go a long way in stabilizing the offensive line and getting it ready for week one. I don't really want to go into a situation where you have two rookies starting and they have the rookie learning curve. And I think, you could look at the Chiefs and say, well, they pulled it off. And that may be true, but I think Creed Humphrey was a little bit of an outlier. And even Rashawn Slater, and the fact that they took, all Pro Bowl strides as rookies. That's not necessarily how it goes all the time. A couple of these guys will. I can see Ike Ekwonu being really pro ready, Evan Neal being really pro ready. Those guys just aren't going to be in the Ravens' range. You look at last year, guys like Sam Cosmi, Liam Eichenberg, the guys that went, towards the end of the round, even Christian Darrisaw, who went 20th to the Vikings. They just had ups and downs, and that's just the life of a rookie. So do we want that at our bookend tackle situation? Go out, get a tackle, solidify one of the spots. I think Trent Brown's an excellent option. He, people say, well, can he play left tackle? Well, he won a Super Bowl at left tackle with the Patriots in a gap or offense like ours. So I think it makes a lot of sense to go do that. So that my focus in free agency is on the offensive line. From Runro or R. Unruh, sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. If Penning is there at 14, does he trump everyone? And if Stingley falls to us, do you have doubts about him coming off his injury 2020 year? With Penning's going to be a bit of a polarizing one, right? Tested really well. In my opinion, didn't play that athletic, but this is that situation I talked about earlier. Maybe that's his potential, right? If he, if the mental processing comes around, maybe he's trained his butt off in this offseason, and that training alone to get ready for the combine did some things like unlock his hips, make him more fluid. You have to factor all that in. I think you're going to get to a situation where Penning is going to make sense if they pick him. They're hitting a position in need. They're getting a guy, with a high relative athletic score, pretty good tape, some deficiencies, but a lot of these things look like they can be coached. You get the guy with the right mentality. He's ready for NFL physicality. I think that's good. We'll find ways to live with it. I just think it's going to be hard to make a case that he was better than some of the defensive players available. So that's kind of where I'm stuck there. And then on the second part of your question with Stingley, I mean, how much does this feel like Marquise Brown, right? Like they went out and drafted, a wide receiver in round 1 in 2019 that had a screw in his foot. So, we've been here before. We were there before with Jimmy Smith, who had injury concerns and then, missed a bunch of times. The Ravens aren't scared to make that risky pick. I don't know about you guys. I have PTSD after last year. I would probably be leaning a little bit more on the safe side of things. So, I mean, they're going to probably go with a guy like Stingley if he falls there and if he's kind of BPA. That just seems to be what they do. but I'm absolutely going to be, I was like this with Marquise Brown his rookie year. Every time he got hit, I cringed just because, not because, even because of his stature, just because I was like, is this the hit that knocks him out for his rookie year? Just having those injury concerns, it makes you nervous. So I think that's definitely going to be something that concerns you. I'm just going to check in on some of the comments. Who do we got here? Amari Burno had a 4.36 40. How much has his stock grown, and could he be fit for Baltimore? Great point. I looked at Burno closely. I always kind of look at guys with that versatile skill set to do some coverage drops in the Sam role. A guy like Dalen Hayes in last year's draft was one of the few guys that could also play off-ball linebacker the way we use Tybo. Barno's one of those guys, absolutely. His athleticism shown. I don't think he's as advanced as a pass rusher, but he has that athletic upside. He fits in what they'll probably ask their Sam to do. He's absolutely going to be in their conversation in those middle rounds, and I think the fact that Hayes and Tybo are hurt is only going to add for that making sense, to get a little bit more insurance there, get a guy that can play off ball, drop into coverage, do all those things. Even though, Wink's gone and Mike McDonald's coming in, Mike McDonald still does some of those things. He played Hutchinson down as like a 5-tech and had Ojabo up as a 2-tech Sam type role. So I think that's something he's still going to prioritize. Checking in here with Jim 20 Eyes. After the first 3 tackles, which one are you comfortable with playing left tackle if Stanley can't go? I think Penning be fine playing right tackle from day one, but left tackle, I absolutely agree. I think Penning is a day one right tackle. I think that's his best fit in the NFL, especially with the Ravens. Put him in that Orlando Brown Jr. role, run power to the right like you did. Just ask him to collapse and down block on guys. Absolutely in his strength. I think it would work really well with him. He really struggled in space on his tape, which you guys would have saw in the film room. A couple guys that I think can kind of provide that sort of stability. Rasheed Walker from Penn State. He's a guy that he's got rawness to his game, but he looks like a true left tackle, measured in well. I think he's one of the guys that can kind of do it. I'm not very high on him, but Bernard Raymond is pretty pro ready. I think he's the kind. I'm not a huge fan of him, but in terms of having pro-ready guys, if Stanley can't rock, I think he'd be a really good one. I see Adam asking, can Falalay start left tackle day one? Oh, it's going to be a tough one. I'm of the opinion, I think he can develop to play left tackle. I really do. Can he do it day one? It's going to be tough. He's just such a raw football player. Sky high potential, but there's nothing in his skill set that makes me think he can't play left tackle. People talk about the speed. I get it. He's a huge guy. He's also very athletic, and the one thing he needs to work on is his vertical set. And if you guys go, I retweeted it. He talked about working on his vertical set at the combine. He's well aware of it. It's something he improved on each day at the Senior Bowl. If you go day one in his vertical set versus day 3, strides of improvement. Didn't do it a lot at Minnesota. But that's what he needs to fix to play on right or left tackle. So, can he do it day one? That would be nerve-wracking. Absolutely. It's just going to be that whole blindside piece playing in. But, does he have a left tackle skill set? I genuinely think he does. There's nothing about it that, he's not lacking in athleticism. He's got the foot speed. It's all about, can he can he match that foot speed with the technique? And it's that technique that needs to come along. So, that's really exciting. And Adam adds, let's hope Cross falls. If Stanley can't rock, there's no better guy to go get than Charles Cross. Charles Cross player comp in my mind is Ronnie Stanley. Very, very good pass protector, needs to improve his run blocking. Improving his run blocking is what took Ronnie Stanley from a good to a very good to an elite tackle. So definitely agree there. Strength Division 1, who are some O-line, D-line guys to keep an eye on in the later rounds, or just guys in general that you think are good fits for the Ravens but don't get mentioned a lot? Starting on the offensive line, a couple of guys that I like for more later rounds. I already mentioned Rasheed Walker. I guess he's probably like a second, third round guy, so not really kind of what you're asking. A guy like Andrew Stuber, I think, makes a lot of sense. Big, physical, left tackle out of Michigan. He did some work all the way inside to center. He had some bad looking one-on-ones. I think a lot of that comes down to he's 6'7", working against interior defensive lineman. It's hard to work with that pad level. So you'll have to factor that in. But, he's a guy that I could see the Ravens being interested in. Repeat the Michigan connection, but it is something that, is relevant and is there. Matt Waletzko is a guy out of North Dakota, I think could really develop. Kellen Deesh, Dare Rosenthal, Obina Easy. Those are the kind of mid-round guys that I see as those developmental left tackles. Whether they hit it in the draft early with a Trevor Penning, or whether they go and buy one in free agency, I really hope they pick up one of these developmental guys. Obina Easy he's just a heck of a talent. He came in with the right size, 6'6", 205, 327, ran, I think he was 5'17" in the 40s, got the athleticism, raw football player. But he has all the tools. Would love to get him in here for kind of a couple of years, especially if he was working behind Ronnie Stanley, to really develop that game out. Dare Rosenthal is a guy that transferred to Kentucky. Again, the right size, good fit for the scheme that I think can develop. Rosenthal, I had some concerns with his tape. He really struggled against Trayvon Walker. And I don't think that's, sure he's a top in the guy in this class, but once you get to the NFL, you're playing against top players every week. So I think it's relevant to factor in that compete level. So him struggling in that game was a little bit of a turnoff, but I still think he's got some nice tools to develop with. In terms of interior guys, specifically centers, because that's a huge need. Cole Strange out of Chattanooga, really good fit for our offense. Reminds me a ton of Quinn Miners. Comes from small school, looks good at the Senior Bowl, goes on to have a good combine, and then we pick Ben Cleveland over him. That one still stings. But he's got that center ability. He can also play guard. Good size on him. Someone that really intrigues me. Thayer Munford's a guy that I find really intriguing. Was a left tackle, moved inside when Petit Frere kicked outside. He's got the length. He's got the size. He's got the aggressiveness. Needs a ton of technique work. If they're looking for a guard tackle, he kind of reminds me, the way they could use him is like a Jaw Reed role, where he's just kind of that inside-outside guy while he tries to develop into a hopeful starter. Cade Mays out of Tennessee had some snaps at center, really intrigues me. Luke Fortner out of Kentucky is a guy that really intrigues me as a center. And then lastly, the guy that intrigues me the most, I'm actually going to be doing a film room with him, which I'm excited because we get to hear from him and hear him talk about some of his reps, is Brock Hoffman out of Virginia Tech. Coming from a run blocking system in Virginia Tech, that also, he only allowed 13 pressures in 2 years as the starting center at Virginia Tech. So that intrigues me. Really good pass protection, really good creation of leverage with his hands, right mindset. He's a dog, plays through the whistle, the kind of mentality I think we all want. So those are kind of the mid-round guys I'm looking at. Another guy that's kind of a bit of a sleeper is James Empey out of BYU. Really smart football player. His dad's an offensive line coach. Kind of grew up in that environment. I think he needs to add weight onto his frame, but he's got the frame to add the weight. So, a lot of these centers in this class are fits for zone schemes, but, a couple of those guys I mentioned, specifically Hoffman and Fortner, I think could fit well in a gap scheme. So they're guys that would intrigue me. Moving on to Uncle Jesse, how serious should we consider Jordan Davis as the guy at 14 versus the edge guys and cornerbacks expect to be there? Jordan Davis, what a freak of an athlete. That was crazy. I thought he'd break 5. There's no way I saw him breaking 4.8. So that was wild to see. How much to consider him? My biggest thing on Jordan Davis is I don't think he's just a nose tackle. There's nothing in his game that I see where he has to be lined up over the center or in the A gap. He's going to demand a double team more often than not. So in terms of how you build that pass rush, he's just too hard to block one-on-one. That's just the reality. He's a monster of a human with good athleticism, and that athleticism does show up on tape. There's just not guys that big taking that first step, getting upfield. He's definitely raw in terms of pass rush moves. He's going to have to work on that to kind of round it out. But there's just nothing, like, all you'd have to do is stick him in the B gap, put him on a 3 tech. You're going to force that center to slide over a full gap What's that going to do on the backside away from him? It's going to create one-on-ones with your other 3 tech and your defensive end. So that's how he can open things up for his teammates. If you leave him one-on-one with a guard and you slide that center to the opposite side, that's going to be a tough day for that guard to block him one-on-one. Just with his ability to collapse the pocket, because he's so big, he's so powerful. So how much should you consider him? I don't think he'll jump over some of those guys. I don't see him being better in the best player available formula than some of those other guys. I also think I would way rather have Travis Jones in round 2 than Jordan Davis in round 1. So you got to kind of factor that in. But how serious should we be to consider him? I think you got to be pretty serious. He does feel like a Raven type player. They love those big dudes clogging the middle. It's always kind of been a feature of this defense in Baltimore. So I think they'll be high on him. The positional value piece comes into play, but I just don't see him as just a nose tackle, just a nose guard. I think he's more versatile than that. Just checking on. You should go to the draft. What's up, Engraven? I should go to the draft. Yeah, I wish, man. I don't even know if I can hop the American border right now from up here. Hope so. With the talk from JR, with the talk of the interior defensive line class being shallow, which prospects would you consider good enough to play a starting role? Great question. Had this talk with someone earlier today. Kind of makes you wonder, how much should you consider a quote unquote reach for a position if it's shallow? So what I mean by that is there's just not enough guys that can kind of get how should I say that? Interior defensive line in this draft class, guys are going to fly off the board, and it's kind of like that well dries up quick, right? With guys that can come in and make an immediate impact. You have Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Davis, Perrion Winfrey, Travis Jones, Fadarian Matthews, and then it kind of falls off, right? You have some role players, you got some developmental players. Throw DeMarvin Leal. I'm really not high on Leal. I think he's a tweener. Not high on him at all, to be honest. So how much can you factor that in? It's tough. It's going to be tough to kind of feel like we've reached for a position because we think that well is going to dry up. But I do think you have to factor it in. I really don't find this class deep. I do find it deep at one text. I think you can go get Ogbonnia out of UCLA, Noah Ellis out of Idaho, Marcon McCall out of Kentucky, if I have that right. Neil Farrell at LSU. Those are all guys that I think you can get to be those run stuffing one text. So, if it comes down to should I take, because I do think Davis and Jones have more upside, but even John Ridgeway, should we take John Ridgeway in the 3rd and kind of get that run stopping, clogging nose tackle, or should we wait till the 4th round comp picks, that 138, 140 cluster we have, and take an Ogbonnia, a Ellis, that sort of thing. So I think you have to factor that in, but in terms of those pass rusher interior defensive linemen, it does dry up. You got to kind of factor that in. I don't want to say reach because, that's not anything you should ever really be preaching, but you just have to factor in, if you're sitting there at 45, for example, and Travis Jones is available, the one tech out of UConn that I think, has a lot of upside, and you're debating between him and a Kerr Elam at corner, or a Woolen, or a Kyler Gordon. You may want to factor in, okay, if we take him now, we can get a corner later that we're pretty happy with, but we're probably not going to be able to get a pass rushing defensive lineman. So, how much do you want to factor that in? I do think you want to, but that BPA is always going to be dominant. But if you're pretty high on Travis Jones, the player, go get him, fill that need, get that pass rush upside from the interior, and move on. That's kind of how I feel. Great question here from Jimmer, fellow Canadian. What are your top 5 O-line in this year's draft? And has there been changes to the list after the combine performance? Nobody in the offensive line group really did much to change me. I mean, Kwanu, Neil Cross, still your top 3 tackles. Penning's still my offensive tackle 4. The only thing that I think changed is Zion Johnson probably jumped Kenny Green as the top guard available. He really showed that athletic upside. He's got a thinner frame, but he's pretty powerful. So I think he's going to fit really well in either a gap or a zone scheme. So I think Kenny Green's going to be a better fit in a gap scheme. So I think that versatility kind of gives him a bump. It sucks that Tyler Linderbaum didn't test because it would have been freakish. He would have been putting up, especially in the shuttle. I think he would have absolutely destroyed it. So that sucked not to see him test. But there's Jimmer in the chat. What's up, man? Thanks for hopping in. So yeah, so I guess to answer your question more directly, what are the top? Like, I'll give you my kind of top 5 tackles right now, and top 5 interior. So I have Cross 1. I know people disagree with me. It is what it is. So I got Cross 1, Aquanu 2, Neal 3, Penning 4, and I have who did I have 5? I think I have Falalay up to 5, jumping Raymond, Petit Frere, and Walker. So those are my top 5 offensive tackles right now. And then on the interior, you got Linderbaum, Johnson, Green. I have Salyer higher. And then Tyler Smith's a tough one because I see him as a high guard. They can also play tackle, but I think a team's going to draft him as a tackle, so do you consider him as a guard? So coming in behind him at 5th, I actually have Ed Ingram, who jumped Salyer and Darian Kennard. I think Ed Ingram is going to be an absolute beast. He's just got those off-field concerns. Tried to do a little bit of research on them. I didn't find much, so I don't want to speculate, but I do think he'll drop because of that. But just as the player, the prospect, very high-level film. So that's kind of what I'm looking at for top 5s. Just checking in on the comments. 25 Nuggets. What's up, buddy? The Ravens have 5 fourth-round picks coming up based on the depth of this draft. Do you draft 5 times in round 4 using one of them? This is a great question. Thank you for asking that. I think trading up in the first round is going to be tough. If you throw in like one of those fourth rounders, you're probably only going to move up a couple spots. So that's going to be really, really tough. But in terms of that second round pick, 45, if I want to get up into the late to mid 30s, throw in one of those fourths and get up there. If you think Falalay is going to go and you really want Falalay, go get him. If Daxton Hill, safety out of Michigan, falls, go up and get him. I think being aggressive with 45 makes a lot more sense, and add 76 into this as well. You could probably throw in 138 and jump from 76 all the way into, bottom of the second round, start of the third round, from 76. Same idea. Get aggressive. Go find the guys you want. Use those fourth round picks. If not, this is a deep class. I think there's going to be a lot of intriguing guys. But if you can get a difference maker, a guy, especially in that second round makes a lot more sense to me. Throw even 108 in, jump right up there, get into the mid 30s. I think it's a great option to use those picks. And like you said, we have a lot of them. From Bruno Oliveira, hey Cole, listener from Brazil, what's your current favorite offseason strategy for the Ravens? Personally, I like to see the Ravens address O-line and free agency and go BPA on defense in the draft. Bruno, my man, you're joining late, but you said literally what I just said, so you are thinking correct, my man. You nailed it. I said it. It was the first question on tonight's Q&A. I'll just repeat it for guys joining us later. I love the idea of addressing the offensive line early in free agency and going into the draft with flexibility. To me, that's hitting center and right tackle or left. I mean, they're not going to hit left tackle because they're going to bet on Stanley. That just seems to be the reality. So cut James before the 22nd. He's on a 500 roster bonus, and then that $500K can't be recouped. I'd cut James because they don't seem confident in the fact that he's going to be ready to go week 1 and they're going to be able to trust him. Cut him, save that $3 million. That goes into probably half of the first-year cap hit of a Morgan Moses or a Trent Brown. Go get him. Figure out right tackle. Then you don't have to worry about it in the draft. You have your right tackle, your right guard, your center, and your left guard competition between Phillips and Cleveland. That's fine. Then you're just drafting for depth. You want to make sure you're still going to take a left tackle pretty high because you're going to want to ensure that contract to to Stanley. So, but maybe you only have to do it at 76 or 99 in the third round versus the first round with like a Penning or, in the second round with some of those other guys. Of course, best player available factor into here as well. But I love the idea of building up that offensive line in free agency. I think there's a lot of guys out there to do it. So that's kind of my preference. So it's funny you hit on that. Going to Perennial Cynic. Who would you take at 14 between David Ajabo, Trayvon Walker, and Jermaine Johnson? I tweeted this out during the combine on Edge Day. It's kind of a fun little grouping of those three. You kind of have the top two pass rushers, and then this group of three, which is Ajabo, Walker, and Johnson. And they all have, my guy Michael Crawford at Bukari always says, when you're looking at some of these guys, it's like going to get ice cream. You love ice cream. The type of flavor you kind of end up with doesn't matter because you love ice cream so much. You just get to pick your favorite of the flavor. So what I'm saying with Ajabo, Walker, and Johnson, to bring this all full circle, Ojabo is your typical throwback speed rusher. He's going to get up. He's going to get upfield, get after the quarterback. Trayvon Walker is your old school power rusher that you can slide inside. And then Jermaine Johnson's kind of your in-between to all around. He's not quite the speed rusher of an Ojabo. He's not quite as powerful as Walker, but he's kind of got a complete skill set. So who would I take of those three? Oh, it's tough. I'd probably lean Jermaine Johnson because, it's tough because Ojabo makes so much sense too. The fun thing about this conversation is Odafe Owe is so versatile that you have that type of, like, you can stand him up and play him as a 3-4 outside linebacker, or you can get his hand in the dirt, play him as a defensive end in more of a power role. So I think that gives the Ravens a lot of flexibility in terms of who they want to bring in and how they want to build these pass rushing defensive lines. I think the thing I like about Jermaine Johnson is he's kind of the complete package. And with Johnson and Owe, they can get back to kind of two true, hand in the dirt, 4-man lines. There's your two bookend defensive ends. So I kind of like that setup. But if they go get Ojabo, it's going to make sense. And Walker also makes sense because we talked about interior defensive line being shallow. He can slide inside and be a pass rusher on the interior. That allows you to get Owe and like a Tybo, a Dalen Hayes out there. So you kind of have, it's like the Pernell McPhee role. So those all three guys intrigue me for different reasons. Like I said, I'll take Michael's words. It's like getting your favorite flavor of ice cream. You just get to pick which one you want. Check in on the comments. Yeah, no worries, Bruno. No, I love the way you're thinking, my man. It's funny to hear you say that because you read my mind, dude. You read my mind. From Jim Eyes, the defensive talent in the draft is tremendous. There will be a defensive player, a defensive BPA in every round. We've got to mine that gold. That's what I'm saying, man. Go fix your O-line in free agency, and then you can just go pick after pick after pick in those top 4 rounds on defense. I think it makes so much sense. You're still going to get your developmental tackle, probably get an interior player too. But you don't have to worry so much about the defense. It's especially deep at linebacker as well. And I think they'd really like to get someone to play beside Queen. I don't know if they're sold on Malik Harrison. So again, if you've kind of already dressed the offensive line, you can go get a Troy Anderson. You can go get a Chad Muma, Quay Walker out of Georgia. A lot of intriguing linebackers. I just want to have offensive line settled and we kind of have a little bit of stability, and I don't have to stress about it on draft night because you guys know where I lean in terms of what I like to watch. And if that O-line is still not figured out going into the draft and then round 1 comes by and they don't pick an offensive tackle, I'm going to be stressing going into that Friday. If the Ravens trade down from 14, what is the most likely trade partner? It's an interesting one because you got to kind of think like who would jump the Eagles. That's kind of the question, right? They got those 3 picks and like 6 picks or whatever it is. So who are the Eagles going to be targeting, and why would someone want to jump them? Who needs a center? Because I could see the Eagles taking Tyler Linderbaum with one of those 3. They're probably not going to care about the positional versatility piece, the positional value piece, because they have 3 first-round picks. Who gives a crap if one of them is a center? So who would trade up for a center? Who would trade up for one of those corners? Because I could see the Eagles doing that. Who wants an Andrew Booth? Who wants a falling Stingley? That type of move. Guys that I think can make sense, I can see the Cardinals at 23 making sense, especially if an edge rusher falls, like if Jermaine Johnson's there. Looks like they're losing Chandler Jones. They could maybe want to pull that trigger, get up there and get one of those defensive ends. But then it begs the question: it's like, why did we trade back? Why did we not just take the defensive end? I think trading back into the early 20s, probably one of the more logical picks would be. The other team that could make sense is the Cowboys if they wanted to trade up for Linderbaum, but would they really trade all that draft capital for a center? That's kind of the tough part. Could see maybe the Saints trying to jump up if they think the Eagles might take a quarterback. I don't know why the Eagles would do that, but if they didn't want to jump back quite as far, I could see that. Because you made the point here, because if those three DNs are on the board, I trade down. The only thing that's going to be tough is I feel like if they trade down, they're all just going to fly off the board. So it depends on who they trade down to and why did that team trade up. And I can't really see a lot of logical reasons a team would trade up other than maybe you get the Saints want to trade up. Probably not though, because they're in such cap issues. They probably want their draft picks. So it's going to be tough. I think a trade down's less likely in this year's draft than in most years. I think they're going to get the better value by standing pat and just taking the pick at their best player available. Festivus Max 52. How high could Falalay creep up on the board? Are we sure he might not get grabbed at 45? Before 45. I think Falalay may sneak into the first round, to be completely honest with you. That type of athletic upside for a person that large is going to be very intriguing. I think the Bengals at 31 are a team that I could really see taking him. I wouldn't sleep on the Titans taking him. He actually fits really well in a zone scheme. He did a lot of that at Minnesota. He's very athletic in space. There's a play from 2019 that I did in his film room on the channel where he was doing outside zone blocking play side against Micah Parsons. And the way he paced his steps to mirror Micah Parsons before he made contact with him was so impressive. And that's Micah Parsons. Defensive rookie of the year. The way he played in the run game against that Penn State 2019 defense really shows his athletic upside. I could see a team like the Titans being really into him. Definitely could see the Bengals. I really think he could sneak into the first round. And if not, I think he's going to go in those kind of first five to six picks of the second round. So I do think if you want Falalay, you'd have to trade up for him or trade down somehow and take him in, the middle of the 20s, which is going to be high for him. And I know people aren't going to be that high on it. But that's really how I see that scenario kind of rolling out. Anyone else just hoping and praying for Kyle Hamilton fall would love him at 14. Keep tweeting, Jemmer. Just keep tweeting that his 40 time was you don't want that 40 time, not in the top 13. Yes, Hamilton's a freak. He's probably one of the best pound for pound, play for play. He's probably one of the best top 3 player in this draft. He's just that good. He's got that type of talent. So obviously if they could get him at 14, I'd be, whatever else has happened at free agency up to there, run that card with Hamilton up there. How about picking up 14 and trading back into the late first? You nailed it. That's been one of my favorite scenarios. So if you look at the JJ chart, which, the JJ chart is, it's pretty consistent with trades. There's always going to be outliers that you can point to and be like, this didn't follow the JJ chart. One of the best examples is when the Eagles traded up for Devontae Smith last year with the Cowboys. I think they paid a division tax because they traded with a divisional rival. But generally speaking, you can get away with that. To get up into to get 32 from the Lions, I think they could get away with giving pick 99 and maybe one of their, you could probably give one of your future 4th round picks or something like that to try and balance out the JJ chart. But picking up 14, BPA defensive player, trading into the late first and taking a Daniel Falalay, getting that 5th-year option, that's a pretty intriguing option to me. Could also do the same and get up there and get Dax Hill. What if you came out of that draft with Dax Hill at 32 and you also just took a Stingley, that type of move? How much better did your secondary just get? So definitely some really interesting combinations that you can put together with that type of move. Getting back into the questions that came in on Twitter. From my guy Connor Kelstrass, what are your thoughts on Petit Frere? Seems to not be discussed much. TDN comp is Ronnie Stanley. I saw that. I really don't like that comp. I don't think he's as good of a mover as Stanley is. I see a lot of guard footwork from him. What I mean by that is short, choppy steps. I think he's really going to struggle with that at the NFL level. So I think that's something, but he is really athletic. I think he's a better fit in a zone scheme than he would be here, especially at right tackle. I really don't see him as a right tackle option in our scheme. I could see him being okay at left tackle. So if they took him, in the second, even at pick 76, and they were pretty confident that Ronnie Stanley couldn't get back, then it would make sense to me. I mean, he should be a good pass protector that isn't a great run blocker at the next level, but you can live with that in your left tackle. You need that guy to be a lockdown pass protector. So I think you could kind of get away with that there. So that type of move would make a lot of sense to me. But overall, I'm not overly high on Petit Frere. I have guys like I have Raymond, Walker, Falalay. I'm debating. I'm having a hard time with Abe Lucas, where to land him. I'm not sure. I gotta go back to his film. He bugs me, but for different reasons. He's got a pretty weak anchor, and I'm just worried about with him having leverage issues and just getting driven through his anchor. So I got to go back to him and do a little bit of work, but he may even jump Petit Frere. I'm really not high on Petit Frere. I'm going to have to do a film room on him, though, because I don't want to slander the man's name. I want to give him his due and, really, put the film out there and show where my head's at. Ravens have done well recently with picking late first, fifth-year option makes a big difference. Lamar Jackson at 32 is a perfect spot. Absolutely. And I mean, the fifth-year option lost some of its value. It's not as cheap as it used to be, but the extra year of control is nice. And it's still going to be somewhat cheap if they're a high-performing player, which if you're picking a high-value position like a tackle that has developed well, you're still going to get a bit of a discount on that fifth-year option. Who's your ideal free agent pickup next week, realistically? Trent Brown. I get it. I get people are going to be worried about the injuries. Using his 2020 injuries against him is a little ridiculous. He missed time with COVID, and then he missed time because he had a pregame IV that had an air bubble in it and caused him to go into cardiac arrest. Not necessarily the most reoccurring injuries. So I'm not, but I do acknowledge the calf last year was a little bit of an injury concern. So, you'd have to be okay with the medical, but a guy that can come in and play right tackle, they can move to left tackle that fits your scheme. There's just not better fits than Trent Brown. The 6'8", 360-pound monster that he is. I think he'd make a lot of sense. And let's get back here. The combine showed that there are a lot of athletic freaks out there, and in my opinion, just made it more difficult to pick at 14. Do you think it's locked to pick a D player at 14 after the combine? I don't want to say lock, but I think it got more likely. There's, like I said, between a Penning versus some of these defensive players, if that's the way the board stacks, it's going to be hard to feel like they took BPA. So, that's kind of how I look at it. But I do think they're probably going to go defense. That's really where I kind of lean. So the combine helped. It made a lot of these guys shine. So it definitely helped. From Yanat and Scott, what tight end in this year's draft could potentially play a similar role as Hayden Hurst? You guys will be familiar with this name. It's Chigi Akawanko. Probably saying it wrong. Okonkwo? Is that what it is? Kid out of Maryland, tight end out of Maryland. Ran a ridiculous 40. Is one of those kind of H-back options I can see. Obviously a very fluid athlete. Ran pretty decent routes. I watched him against Michigan the night that they tested just because I wanted to see some of his film. I think he's a guy that can get in the fourth, that can come in and do some of that moving. His blocking was actually a little bit better than I was expecting. Obviously, he's not going to be like a Nick Boyle type blocker, but as a move tight end, kind of an H-back, that role that Hayden Hurst played for us, I think it'd be a really good fit. Get him in the middle rounds, and you're getting an upgrade over like a Josh Oliver. So I think that would make a lot of sense.
Checking in on these. If the Ravens sign Trent Brown or Moses, would you still take Falalay if he's there at 45? Yes, because I think if they got, it really depends. Like, I think they could go get Trent Brown on a 2-year deal. So if they go get Trent Brown on a 2-year deal, you're going to be kind of in the same spot in 2 years. So then you just picked Falalay, who's developing. Look at a guy like Jordan Maleta out of Philly. Similar situation, right? Australian, started playing football very late in his life with a rugby background, and look at the player he's grown into. He was given that time on the bench in Philly to develop. It's kind of like seeing some of these quarterbacks sit for a couple years or even just a year. It would kind of be a little bit of a sting that you took a guy at 45 that isn't getting on the field immediately, but the way he could develop behind these guys, especially playing with someone like Brown that's similar size, similar type of developmental path that you want to see. He's still very much in the picture for me there. Again, I think he can play left tackle. So he provides that versatility off the bench as kind of a high-level offensive tackle backup, which with the injury concerns the Ravens have had, specifically with Ronnie Stanley, I think it makes sense to overinvest there. So I can justify it enough to make that move. Is Raymond not on your radar at all? I feel like I've heard about him as OT5 or so, but not sure he's crossed your pass for the film room. I got to do film room on him. It's kind of what I just said about someone else. I got to give him Petit Frere. I got to give him his day in court, right, and put the film out there and kind of walk through my thoughts. It wouldn't be fair not to. So I am going to be doing him very, very soon, and I'm looking forward to it. Again, he's a little mechanical in his pass sets. He's a really raw football player, Austrian, that started playing late, similar to Falalay. What kills me is him being 25. And the reason it kills me, I usually don't care about age that much, but being an older prospect and not being physically dominant in situations like the Senior Bowl, they just bug me. Because at 25 years old, how much more can you grow physically? It's all going to be about making him a better football player. So how much more physical can he get at this age? It's going to be tough. And it's also, maybe at 45, I can live with it because he has that left tackle ability and he should be turned into a really good pass protector. So I can see that making sense. He's also got really good size. But the ceiling is a little lower than I'd like to see with Raymond. And who is the Orlando Brown of this draft? Someone's going to fall because of a bad combine, but shouldn't. Oh, that's a really good question. I don't think there was anyone that had like really high expectations and then like really crap the bed. Like the way Orlando Brown crapped the bed, like showing up and pushing out 14 reps and like ran like a 5.6, which is like I run like a 5.8. So I mean he almost ran as slow as I did. Like that was truly bad. But a couple of guys that didn't really stand out, some of those bigger noses, like I don't want to say Neil Farrell because he wasn't expected to be a first rounder. I honestly can't think of anyone that really failed the combine that bad. Like really tanked the combine. So I'm not sure there's an Orlando Brown. There are a couple guys that I could see slipping a little bit. I think George Karlaftis is probably going to slip a little bit. But again, he didn't really have a bad combine by any means. Maybe no, because you look at some of these edge rushers; they all crushed it. I really don't see an Orlando Brown in this class. Great question though. It's always fun to kind of hit on those guys. Going back here, flood your questions in right now because I have one more Twitter one and then I'll kind of wrap up. So if you guys drop them in the comments right now, so I get to them. Give your cornerback ratings, LMAO. I don't know why you're laughing, per black ratings. This is a bit of an inside joke. I always say corners are boring because they are. But kind of how I see the corners. I got Sauce at 1. I got Stingley at 2 because I just that upside is there. I got Booth at 3. I got Kyler Gordon at 4. I got McDuffie at 5. I put Kyler Gordon up. I just think he's got better instincts, at least what I saw on tape. I got Roger McCreary. I got Matt Elam, Kerr Elam, and then I got Marcus Jones, followed by Tariq Woolen. One of the guys I'm probably lower on in terms of what I saw on film was Woolen versus his athletic testing. Obviously, he tested like crazy, but I wasn't sure that, it's tough with the competition aspects, and he did have a good Senior Bowl, but I didn't see like that explosive of an athlete where he was kind of putting up those types of numbers on the field. In terms of his explosiveness, not his long speed. His long speed, I think he clocked in at the fastest Senior Bowl miles per hour that they've ever had. So he's got that long speed, but in some of the agility, I didn't quite see the explosiveness to cut on breaks. Wasn't quite there. So I had a little bit of issues with him there. I'm a little bit higher on Marcus Jones than a lot of people. Another guy that I'm a lot higher on than others is Kobe Bryant. He got targeted a ton at Cincinnati because they weren't targeting Sauce Gardner. And I thought he held up really well. He's got some things he needs to work on, but as, a fourth round guy, I think he'd be a great fit to develop on the bench. Kind of reminds me of the type of development story that Anthony Averett was. People kind of dogged on him, gave him a hard time, but you can't deny he was good depth coming off the bench, played in a lot of big moments for the Ravens. This year obviously sucked just because he got kind of thrown to the wolves and then everybody else started dropping. But he quietly, outside of one or two really bad games, he had some really solid ones. Those kind of fourth round picks that can develop at corner would be really great to have. He's also got really good size, so that's intriguing. So that rounds out our questions that came in. Again, if you guys have any, drop them in the comments on YouTube. Do me a favor, hit the like button. Goes a long way in supporting these videos. And hit subscribe if you guys want to find your way back for more. Not seeing any more coming in, so I'm going to wrap up. Fantastic first attempt at an AMA. Thank you guys so much. Like I said, you guys formed the roundtable today, so I really appreciate it. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. Peace out, everyone.